Welcome back to Wheellifeconnections. I'm so excited to have our next guest on our show. This is Nicole Coratti. She is a disability advocate. She loves showing people all of her different abilities and helping them discover theirs as well. So I'm super excited to have her here with us tonight. She's going to share a little bit about her story and what she's currently doing within her community. So Nicole, welcome to Wheellifeconnections. We're super excited to have you.
Thank you so much. Super excited to be here tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. So Nicole, can you start off by just sharing with our viewers a little bit about yourself?
My name is Nicole Coratti, but I like to be called Nikki. And I was born at 26 and a half weeks with cerebral palsy. And that was the first, my first initial diagnosis. Shortly after that, I was diagnosed with severe nearsightedness and visual deficits as well. So you might imagine that created many hurdles and many different ways of having to find solutions, but I had a great support system of family and extended family and friends to help me be able to find that. And just like everybody else, we always have different things in our life happen that make us have to adjust and adapt to what the world sees us as, and we have to just understand that we have the superpowers within us to go beyond what people's mindset are for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And we just have to show them that we can do it. It might be differently, but we do it as best we can. And if we struggle for a moment, we have to realize that the lessons and opportunity, not necessarily saying that we can't do that situation. It just means it may not be for that moment, but eventually, if it's supposed to be again, it will come back, so we can have that opportunity to achieve that goal.
Perfect. Okay, so let's, if it's okay with you, can you explain a little bit about your disability and what that is so that we can get more comfortable with cerebral palsy and understand it?
Yes, I have my specific type of cerebral palsy is quadriplegic cerebral palsy, which means that I have all four limbs affected. Both arms and both legs are affected on some level. And also, with that being said, I am also one of the patients that is very fortunate to consider to not have seizures. And so I fortunately never had a seizure so far. So, and I'm not even on any muscle relaxers or anything for my cerebral palsy. However, with that being said, I do go to chiropractic care, and I am under a chiropractic care for adjustments every 2 weeks to just keep my body in alignment and healthy, and everything that goes along with that.
Okay, that's awesome. So for your disability, do you use any mobility devices?
Yes, I use a power wheelchair.
Okay.
I use the power wheelchair mostly in the community, which means I use the paratransit system. And as one might wonder, can that be challenging? Of course it can, but I'm very fortunate that at least it's there.
Very true.
And then in my home, I use a manual wheelchair.
Okay, perfect. So you move yourself around your house with your arms?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Mainly my arms, and then when I want to get out of my wheelchair, I've created my own ways of doing that.
Okay.
Mostly just kind of scooting around on my arms, and kind of like army crawling.
Okay, very cool.
And also just kind of sitting and scooting around on my backside, I guess you could say.
Yeah, on your butt.
Exactly.
It's okay to say butt. I scoot around on my butt all the time.
So I do that, and then Sarah, I have grabbers.
Okay.
I have large and small grabbers, and then because of my visual differences, I have, when I need to read something, I have everything in large print.
Okay.
Or I have the device or object talk to me.
Very cool. So do you prefer Apple or Android?
I prefer, at this point, I've used both, but I prefer Apple.
Siri's a little easier to talk to, huh?
It is. And Sarah, another recent a different ability of mine that I'm just getting used to now is actually, I was just diagnosed with decreased hearing. So I just got my hearing aids last week.
Oh, wow. How are those working for you? Are they working well?
Hold on just a second. Let the phone pass. Yes, they are working very well. I realized how much I could not hear. Everything was muffled. But when I put them on for the first time last week, I was like, oh my gosh, I hear what my voice sounds like. And because I particularly know you from past experiences, I was like, oh wow, I probably sounded like a little kid.
Aw, well, that's good. I'm glad they're helping. That's good.
Yeah, so I was I was kind of surprised how I sounded, because I thought I sounded like a little 8-year-old. And everybody said, no, you sound just fine. So, for example, I'm hearing the sound of birds before. I'm hearing the sound of just things I've never heard before. And I'm like, that's what it sounds like? So it's a whole new world.
Wow, that's awesome, though. It's good that they're able to have those devices, so those are what's important to help us be able to live a little bit more independently as well.
Right.
So, Nikki, what was it like growing up with a disability? What did that look like for you? Going to school, parents, sibling support, anything like that?
It was very different. I was thinking about that today, knowing that you were probably going to ask me this question. And the easiest way I can think about it, at times I grew up on both sides of the fence, because I grew up around in the more ambulatory world as well as the more differently abled world.
Okay.
But I had the best of both worlds in certain situations, and in other situations, not so much. One of the biggest challenges that I went through, especially in school, is when I was 13 years old, I was asked not to come back to school. And that was because at the time we lived out in the country, so we had a sand gravel driveway, and it rained one particular morning really hard, so the school bus got stuck. So the school board, the county was saying, well, we have to get our driveway paved, and in order for Miss Coratti to go back to school, she has to have that done, or we're not going to come pick her up and let her go to school. So for 4 months, I advocated. I did TV and newspapers, articles, and things like that. But in a very firm but loving way, I had to do that, because everybody deserves the right to go to school.
Right.
If they have that opportunity. And it was very, very humbling, because I had to learn that I was much more than my different abilities. And that was very difficult, because even though I grew up on both sides of the world, family-wise, I was an only child until my half-sibling came along. So I basically, as they say, had to pick up myself by my own bootstraps and kind of figure it out, because I had working parents and they kind of had to do their thing. And so I became a latchkey kid at the age of 8.
Gotcha.
So my parents would pretty much, of course they would check them out first and do what they needed to do, but they would pretty much introduce me to the neighbors, put their important numbers where I could see them, where I could reach them, and basically help me prepare my food the night before.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because sometimes at the time my mom worked for the accessible bus in the morning for the school system, so she had to get up at 4 or 3 in the morning, and my stepfather had to help me get ready for school. And boy, was that funny. Because a man doing a stepdaughter's hair at 4 in the morning sometimes, ouch.
Yeah, I'm sure.
and and so I learned a lot about myself, but I learned a lot about other people, and I think that's where partly my compassion and my empathy for others came in, not just because of how I was, the cards I was given, but also just because I saw different things from other people's perspective.
Right.
But I also learned how I had to stick up for myself and
Right.
not let other people bully or not even become my own bully.
Exactly. Exactly. I was just going to ask you about bullying because it's always interesting to see what side of the bullying table you're on. Were you your own bully or were you bullied? And did you let people bully you?
At, I can say on most of the time, unfortunately, I was bullied, but there were times when I was my own bully, not because I didn't believe in myself, but because I was just trying to develop that repertoire, that person
Yep.
I wanted to be.
Correct.
And so I could honestly say I was both sides of the coin on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's switch gears a little bit to today's world. And let's talk about kind of when you're out and about in the community. What are your thoughts on people staring and kind of how do you react to something like that? And my second question would be, are you open to answering questions if people come up to you in the store?
When I see people staring, and for the first couple minutes, I just kind of watch where their gaze is.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I realize they're staring at me, I meet their eye level, and then for about 30 seconds or a minute, we're looking at each other, and I just kind of nod as to say, "Would you like to talk, or is everything okay?" And most of the time, surprisingly, Sarah, not in today's world, for me at least, people actually, when they see me kind of give that nod of it's okay to ask questions, they actually come over to me and ask questions, and they're like, "You're the first person that I've ever seen with a disability out in the community just doing life."
Yeah.
So I get a lot of questions, of course, just like any other person. I don't like the stares, but in my formative years, but even as um, even as short as maybe 2 months ago, I used to still have let that bother me. But
Right.
now I don't, because I realize that they're just people trying to understand what differences are. And then when I see them doing, like I said, when I see them doing that, by making that eye contact with them, they realize that I'm not going to, be like a school teacher, say you shouldn't, you couldn't. I kind of give that body posture of you're welcome to come ask me questions.
Yeah.
Now, of course, if the questions are a little bit different or a little bit not inappropriate, but a little bit personal, I say I'm not going to answer that at this time.
Right.
Because I don't really know you, but I appreciate that you want to know, but I suggest you kind of, maybe you kind of do a little bit more research about why you wanted to ask that question.
Right.
And then if I see you again, maybe we can have a discussion.
Right. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think it's a lot about education at this point. I mean, I'm also very open to answering questions, and the reason why is because normally it's the little kids that stare first. And parents are very quick to turn their kids away and don't stare at her, don't do that. And I'm like, I would rather them come up to me and ask me a question, because they're the next generation of people who are either going to accept those of us with disabilities or not. And the more we can educate them while they're young, the easier it's going to be for them to be open to it when they become an adult. And that's how we're going to change society, is by starting with the younger people. So I think it's really important that as best as we can, we answer as many questions as possible, because the only way to help with this is to educate.
Exactly, and as you and I have had numerous experiences on different levels, and sometimes the same level, it's okay. No question is a silly question.
Right.
And when children and adults alike realize that, they're like, wow, we didn't realize, quote unquote, because of your different ability, you were so open. And you're like, wait a second, I'm a person first.
Mm-hmm.
I have a name. And if I may, really quickly, to really bring it into today's time, I actually had an experience yesterday with that. I was filming for something completely different that might be on a local PBS channel here in Florida. I'm not sure if it's going to actually happen yet. I'm waiting to be told. And the photographer and the producer were saying, let the girl in the wheelchair come over. And they kept saying that like 7 or 10 times, and about what seemed like the 15th time, I'm like, excuse me, I have a name.
Exactly.
And for the reason, Sarah, why I want to mention that is because for the whole interview, they were calling me by my name. But suddenly, for about 10 minutes there, they were just saying, the girl in the wheelchair, move her this, move her that way, move her here, move her there. And I'm like, hold on, stop, wait a second, I have a name. So I found myself having to re-educate them, even though they were the ones that are getting ready to produce the show.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But we always need a friendly reminder, and that's the best way to do it. Because the girl in a wheelchair is about 6 more words than Nikki. And it'd be a lot easier if they just said, let's move Nikki this way. I mean, they're saving themselves a lot of time, right?
Exactly. And Sarah, that's exactly why I brought it up, because I'm like, you're just wasting your breath.
Exactly. My name is 5 letters. Just use my name.
Exactly.
That's awesome, though. I love your outlook, and it's very motivating, and I hope that our viewers see that as well, because we are very open. A lot of us are. There are some people that aren't comfortable answering any questions, and that's okay, too. But for those of us that are, it hopefully will make people more comfortable in understanding what, disabilities are all about, because they're everywhere.
Exactly. And Sarah, as you can see behind me, I live independently as possible in my own apartment. So I'm actually in my little dining room talking with you, and behind me is my kitchen, but I have a 2-bedroom, 2-bath.
Nice.
And I have a kitchen and a pantry and everything. And I have someone that comes in for about 6 to 7 hours, depending on what my schedule is for the day, to help me with life essentials, such as what everybody does, eating,
right,
showering, things like that.
Sure.
And then when they're finished doing those needs that I need help with, they say Nikki or Nicole. It depends on the person how they want to address me. And also, Sarah, I don't know if this happens with you too, but also it depends on how long they've known me, what they prefer to call me.
This is true, but my name is only 4 letters, and it's Sarah, and there's no other cool nickname to go with it, so I'm just Sarah.
Exactly. And so I'm appreciative that I have that opportunity to be on the med waiver and to have the services. Are the services always easy to understand, always easy to navigate? Of course not.
Right.
A matter of fact, I'm going through a very interesting situation with that right now, where the state wants to change that.
Right.
And so I'm having to advocate to not do that.
Right. Yep, exactly. I think we need people to understand that we never stop advocating. It's something we do every day, because you always need something, additional, or somebody wants to take something away, And it's our job to fight for what we need to keep because those are our rights. And that's how we live independently. And so it's so important to be able to advocate and speak up for yourself. It's very important to be able to communicate what your needs are.
Exactly.
So Nicole, let's go to the next question. Let's talk a little bit about, your positive attitude. You're really positive and you love doing things and being involved in your community, obviously, as we can tell. So how do you keep your positive attitude all the time?
I draw very strongly on my faith.
Mm-hmm.
I attend church at the moment virtually right now. Mm-hmm. But I have started to venture out going to a women's Bible study every 2 weeks.
Nice.
And as you have known in the past, I was a part of a little bit of an online study here and there.
Uh-huh.
So that was fun. But I also, Sarah, I make sure that I'm around. I know it's not always easy to do, and it's not always, it seems very limited at times, and that's not my intention, but I always try to be around positive people that see how I was created to be, and that help me be able to nourish that. Because if I don't know about you, but if I'm not around those people, at least for some period of the time, we can always go down those paths that are not always the best paths to go in terms of our thought processes and such. And so I always try to make sure that I stay close to God and stay close to the people that support me. And sometimes you find out the hard way, sometimes you find out the easy way, but it's worth it. And I do a lot of downshifting. I do a lot of coloring. I do a lot of artwork.
That's awesome.
I do a lot of creative outlets.
That's good. Yeah, I think it's important to know. I mean, each one of us, we maybe have that positive side or that positive outlook, but we all go through the points where we are very not positive as well. So, you know, people can tear you down. I mean, it doesn't take too many people. One bad egg turns everybody bad, and you're like, oh my gosh, I need to find positivity quick. So it's definitely something, it's always important to surround yourself with the people who make you stronger and who support you. So I definitely agree with you there. So Nicole, who's your role model? Who do you look up to?
I look up to so many people. But first of all, I look up to Jesus. Because he loves us first and foremost.
Right.
Secondly, he would be so surprised I would say this, because he's been through so many different changes in his life. But I look up to my dad.
Nice.
And I look up to my parents in their own ways. But what's unique about those things that I mentioned is just because I was born differently abled, I choose to look at what path they took, and even what path I've taken throughout my life, and take those nuggets of positive and negative and in between, and say, and you know, sometimes they can be all mixed up in a bowl, and say, okay, what can I take from that experience to move forward and find a solution?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's important. I know it's hard for me as a person in a wheelchair, that there's not many people to look up to that look like me. So the people that I look up to who are role models are typically people who have similar attitudes, or they're on a similar path, or they're just as motivated as I am. So it's more traits and actions that I look up to than it is, you know, the physical being of the person. But maybe one day that'll change. And so people will look up to people like you and I, and they'll be like, yes, because she looks just like me too. And I love what she did, you know? And so it's empowering to know that that can happen one day. It would be amazing. But role models can be anybody and anything, honestly, depending on how you look at them.
Exactly. And Sarah, I don't know if you've had this experience, but one thing interestingly, especially that I've learned this week about just how people look at me or perceive me, I don't know, they always seem to have this spiritual element to how they look at me, and I'm like, okay, thank you, you know, and they expect for me to answer like certain evangelists or certain people, you know, who teach the word of God and things like that. I'm like, it's not always like that. I like different music. I like different things. And, I like different things. And Sarah, I look up to you, and, in some ways I can only hope that you can look up to me too. And so, so we all look up to each other, but that's the unique thing about people with different abilities, is we look to each other to see what makes us stronger, but we also look to each other to help us grow.
Right.
And to help us change, and to help us, again, the old adage there, advocate and to educate and to show compassion and kindness. Because people, at least for me, like you asked me earlier, was I the bully or was I bullied? At least for me, I didn't always show kindness to myself, nor did people show kindness to me, but it all starts with us ultimately,
right.
No matter how we were born.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. It's so important. And the connections you can make with individuals, even if we share a similar story, or even if we share a similar struggle, it's how did you struggle through and how did I struggle through? And then let's make sure the next person that's struggling doesn't struggle your way or my way, so we can make sure they make it even more successfully than we did, right? So it's all about, successes and failures, because we have to learn from the experiences. So if one of us can go through it, then we can help this person to go through it the second time. So it's super important. So Nicole, what about, we kind of talked about technology a little bit, because we talked about using voice activation and things like that, and your power wheelchair. Is there anything currently right now in your community you would like to change or see more accessible?
Yes. Parks.
Parks? Like what kind of park? Be a little more specific.
Not like a playground, but where the picnic tables have a spot for wheelchair users.
Okay.
And not just a typical picnic table where you just like, okay, am I always gonna have to bring a tray or something like that? Like I don't know if in Jacksonville you have those, but in Naples, Florida, we don't have any of that. Parks. One thing I noticed, all the buildings, at least most of the buildings here in Naples, Florida, unless I've said something or unless somebody before me has said something, I noticed that even though they've just been recently built, I constantly look for the push buttons. And I'm like, where are the push buttons? I just wish it wasn't even a thought. I just wish it was there naturally.
Right, exactly. Those are two good things. Parks are really important. I think there's a difference between an accessible park and an inclusion park. And so that's what I'm currently working on here, is making a park more inclusive instead of just accessible, because accessible states that I can get to the park, but I can't use the park. And so I want people to be able to utilize the park and the playground. And so that means it needs to be built with inclusion in mind. And so that takes a lot more equipment, takes different tables, different types of water fountains, and different types of playground equipment so that we can all play at the same time. So it's definitely something that needs to change.
Yeah, for sure. It's the inclusion revolution 2020.
Exactly.
We hope it to be anyway.
That's right. That's right. So is there anything right now that you can think of that you feel uncomfortable with that somebody maybe outside the disability community tends to do?
Maybe it's because of I was born petite or something, but to this day, Sarah, it still kind of irks me and bothers me that people stand up when they talk, and I constantly have to look up at them. I'm like, could you please come to my eye level so I don't have to? Can you sit at my eye level and engage with me and not hover over me?
Right, exactly.
The helicopter. I don't know if you've interviewed anybody else thus far, but for me, Sarah, I've noticed that still happens a lot, and that's something recently that I'm still having to deal with even all these years later. Just people assume that just because I'm a wheelchair user or a hearing aid user now, that I'm just automatically deaf mute, and all of a sudden my intelligence went down,
Yeah.
and or just kind of stare at me as I don't know how to handle you. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't know how to handle me? As if I'm a bag of potatoes instead of a human being that has emotions and a heart and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the only thing for me that's hard is when people bend down to have an eye level conversation with me, they also make their voice like they're talking to a 3-year-old. And I am 27 and I don't need to be talked to like I'm 3. And it
Yes,
drives me crazy.
I experienced the same thing, and I'm definitely a little older, and I'm just like, really? You're gonna talk to me as if I'm 3 years old? No.
Exactly. Exactly. So when you bend down and talk to us at eye level, please talk like a normal adult because we're normal adults as well.
Exactly. And then I don't I've had this experience too, Sarah, where I get mail and they're like, for your child. I'm like, I've not been a child for a long time, but okay.
Yep, I have that same problem. I'm still, yep, for your child. I'm like, okay. But I think another thing is really important since we're talking about kind of having that open conversation and making that eye contact is if I don't know if you go anywhere with your caregivers that come in and take care of you, but I take mine out sometimes to go to like restaurants and things like that. And the waiter talks to the caregiver like I'm not there and asks them my order, and they're not going to know my order because I know my own order.
Exactly. And Sarah, and whether it's my friend or like you just said, a caretaker, that still happens to me all the time. And a matter of fact, I just went somewhere today, and the girl looked at my friend, my first my buddy match for best buddies,
Uh-huh.
the one-on-one friendship. I'm the first differently able match for Southwest Florida with my adult buddy, and they looked at her for my order, and I'm like, excuse me, right here. And fortunately, Jenny's starting to get to really know me, my personality, and she's like, she's right there. You can talk to her.
I like when my caregivers or my friends will do that and they'll be like, I'm not talking to you. If you want to ask her, just look at her and ask her. And it's like, thank you. This is so frustrating. Just talk to me.
Yes, and Sarah, if I may, I think I've watched a couple of your videos where I'm like, I gotta refine that part of my backbone because I used to be like that. I need to remind myself that I need to say, hey, you can talk to me, because sometimes even I forget that too, and I'm just gonna be a little bit more forthcoming about that.
Yeah, absolutely. We can get shy. I've definitely had moments where I don't say anything either and I kind of just let it go. And then later on, I regret letting it go because I missed my opportunity to educate that person, And so it's something I have to keep reminding myself of. So before we go here, I'm going to kind of wrap it up a little bit. Is there anything, so tell me a little bit about what you like to do for fun. I know you keep pretty busy, but what do you like to do for fun?
I love to sing. I love to act, which I didn't really get to do that a little earlier when I got a chance to meet you. I've done a lot of that. I've done some modeling too. I love doing that kind of thing. I love going to the beach. I love going to the beach. But just again, we need to make it more inclusive, not just accessible.
Yeah.
I love taking pictures. I love taking pictures. I don't love being the subject of pictures sometimes. But I love being creative with any type of art medium and doing that kind of thing. I love writing. I'm hopefully in 2021. I'm looking forward to writing or starting to write my first book.
Nice.
So I'm not really sure what it's going to all be about, but I have a friend who's a publisher, and he's always been encouraging me. He said, Nikki, you're a wonderful speaker. You're a wonderful writer. You just got to do it with more practice. And there's so much inside of that little heart and that little body of yours that somehow, some way it's going to come out. And Sarah, with that being said, I want to share with you a very exciting opportunity that's coming in the pipeline, not only with Best Buddies, have I been practicing public speaking? Because that's one of the things that we work on with Best Buddies. Is I've been asked to do some versions of TED Talks.
Nice. That's
Here
exciting.
here in Southwest Florida through an organization called the Southwest Florida Blue Zone.
Okay.
So after this month, can't believe it's already October, but after this month, I'm going to be working with the two women that are in charge of that to see when we're going to start recording and exactly what we're going to record.
That's awesome. TEDx is so much fun. I love the one that I got to do years ago, so you'll really enjoy it. It's a really great experience, and hold on to it as long as you can because I miss it. I'm ready to go back and do another one, but it's a lot of fun. So before we go, Nicole, is there anything that I didn't ask you or any piece of advice you'd like to give the community before we go today?
I would just say, just be open-minded. I know that sounds cliche, but just be open-minded because people with different abilities, people with different mindsets can also teach you about something that maybe you've been wanting to learn about.
Mm-hmm.
And so just give them a chance, give them an opportunity, and remember that we can all learn from each other, but we also have to continue to practice kindness while we do that, because the two things that the differently able world and the inclusive world kind of use hand in hand is the word compassion and kindness. And we've all been through 2020 this year. It's been an interesting year, but I think we're finally realizing continually what's most important to all of us for whatever the reasons may be.
Mm-hmm.
And so compassion and kindness are the two things that I could say to individuals out there, both in the differently able world as well as the community in which we are speaking to tonight, and even individuals within our own situations and our own circumstances, to help to give them hope that we are all in this together, for the lack of a cliche, and we can all be stronger together than apart. So I think that's the most important thing I can think of.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. I think compassion and kindness is so important. It just helps to kind of eliminate all that uncomfortable tension between somebody, and it really brings us closer together, right? Because kindness is something that can be spoken amongst any language for any person, no matter the situation. And so it's so important just to be open-minded, and it can be as cliche as you want, but the more open-minded people are, the easier it is for everybody to be included and accepted. So Nicole, thank you so much for your time tonight. It was great getting to know your story and hearing about what you do for the community. So I'm really excited to have you. So we will sign off for now, but we will keep in touch with Nicole. Nicole will send me links so you can follow Nicole as well and follow her journey, as she's got some good things coming. So we want to make sure we can support her too. So I will make sure that our community can connect with you, Nicole, and then we'll share your story and see how it goes. So thanks, Nicole, so much for your time.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for the opportunity to come into your world as well.